In the opulent halls of the Vanderbilt mansion, where marble floors echoed with the whispers of wealth and crystal chandeliers cast prisms of light like scattered diamonds, Alexander Vanderbilt paced restlessly one autumn evening. He was a man forged in the fires of high finance, his days consumed by boardroom battles and stock market symphonies, leaving little room for the softer melodies of family life. His son, young Elias, barely 8 years old, had always been a quiet shadow in the grand estate, more at home with his toys than with the stern tutors Alexander hired to mold him into a future tycoon. But lately, peculiar sounds had begun to infiltrate the sanctity of their home, murmurs that slithered through the walls like secrets from a forbidden library. They weren't the usual clatter of silverware or the hum of the vacuum. No, these were voices, layered and lilting, twisting around vowels in ways that defied the crisp English Alexander knew so well. At first, he dismissed them as echoes from the staff's radios, perhaps some foreign news broadcast slipping through the ether. Yet as the days wore on, the voices grew bolder, weaving through the night like threads in a tapestry of intrigue. Alexander found himself lingering outside closed doors, ear pressed to polished oak, straining to decipher the enigma. Was it a prank from the gardeners? A hidden guest? His mind, sharpened by years of mergers and acquisitions, raced through possibilities, each more improbable than the last. Little did he know, these ethereal tones were the prelude to a revelation that would upend his world, challenging the very foundations of privilege he held so dear. One crisp evening, as the sun dipped below the manicured hedges, painting the sky in strokes of amber and rose, Alexander decided he could no longer ignore the symphony of strangeness. Armed with nothing but his curiosity and a glass of aged scotch for courage, he crept toward the source, the mansion's labyrinthine corridors, his unwitting accomplices in this clandestine quest. The voices emanated from the sun-drenched study on the east wing, a room Alexander rarely entered, preferring the stark efficiency of his office downtown. As he approached, the murmurs resolved into fragments, sharp consonants that snapped like castanets, rolling R's that tumbled like distant thunder, and silken sibilants that evoked sun-baked markets under azure skies. His hand hovered over the brass knob, heart pounding with a thrill he hadn't felt since sealing his first multi-million-dollar deal. With a deep breath, he turned it slowly, the door sighing open on well-oiled hinges to reveal a scene that froze him in the threshold. There, bathed in the golden glow of late afternoon light filtering through lace curtains, stood Maria, the unassuming maid who had tended their home for over a decade. She was a woman of quiet grace, her dark hair pinned neatly under a crisp white cap, her uniform starched to perfection, always blending into the background like a well-placed vase. But now, she commanded the room with an authority Alexander had never witnessed. Before her, perched on a velvet-cushioned chair, was Elias, his small frame attentive, eyes wide with wonder. A blackboard, salvaged from some forgotten corner of the attic, dominated the wall, adorned with an array of colorful flags pinned in neat rows. The stars and stripes of America, the tricolor of France, the bold green and yellow of Brazil, the red and gold of Spain, and the rising sun of Japan. Maria's chalk-dusted hand gestured animatedly, her voice shifting seamlessly from one tongue to another, drawing Elias into a verbal ballet that spanned continents. Bonjour, Elias, comment que va aujourd'hui? She began in fluid French, her accent wrapping around the words. Like a warm embrace. Elias responded tentatively, his cherubic face lighting up as he stumbled through the reply, que va bien, merci, Madame Maria. Alexander blinked, his scotch glass nearly slipping from his fingers. This was no ordinary lesson, but a gateway to worlds he had never deigned to explore. Stunned into silence, Alexander watched from the shadows as Maria transitioned effortlessly, her voice now a rhythmic cadence of Portuguese. Olá, Elias, como estás? Vamos falar sobre a familia hoje, she said, pointing to a drawing Elias had scribbled earlier, a crude sketch of their mansion encircled by smiling faces from every corner of the globe. The boy nodded eagerly, his usual shyness melting away as he parroted, Eu estou bem, e a familia é grande, como o mundo. Laughter bubbled from Maria's lips, genuine and unrestrained, filling the room with a warmth that seeped into Alexander's bones, thawing the frost of his bewilderment. He had hired her years ago on a whim, impressed by her impeccable references and unyielding discretion, never once suspecting the depths of her intellect. Born in a sleepy village in Portugal, Maria had traversed oceans and borders, picking up languages like wildflowers along the way, French from a Parisian aunt, Spanish from border town neighbors, Japanese from a brief stint in Tokyo's bustling cafes, and of course, her native Portuguese layered over the English she wielded with quiet precision. For her, language was not a barrier but a bridge, a tool to connect the isolated corners of her heart to the vast human tapestry. Elias, starved for such connections in the sterile world of wealth, drank it in like parched earth after rain. As Alexander observed, Maria switched to Spanish, her tone playful yet instructive. Hola, Elias. ¿Qué tal? Hoy practicamos los verbos, she announced, scribbling conjugations on the board with swift, elegant strokes. Elias leaned forward, his small finger tracing the words, Yo soy, tú eres, ls. The flags fluttered slightly in the breeze from an open window, as if applauding their progress. Alexander's mind reeled. His son, whom he had pegged for private schools and Ivy League pipelines, was blooming under the tutelage of the very woman who dusted their heirlooms. The revelation hit Alexander like a rogue wave, crashing over his preconceptions and leaving him adrift in uncharted emotional waters. He stepped forward involuntarily, the creak of the floorboard betraying his presence, and Maria turned, her eyes widening in a mix of surprise and quiet defiance. "Mr. Vanderbilt," she said in perfect English, her voice steady as a diplomat's, "I didn't hear you come in." Elias beamed up at his father, oblivious to the tension crackling in the air like static before a storm. "Papa, Maria is teaching me how to speak to the whole world. Listen, arigato." The Japanese word tripped from his lips with a child's unfiltered joy, and Alexander felt a pang in his chest, sharp and unfamiliar. He had always envisioned education as a ladder to power, Latin for logic, mathematics for mastery, but this was alchemy, transmuting everyday words into keys that unlocked hidden realms. Maria stood tall, unflinching under his gaze, her hands clasped in front of her apron as if ready to defend her makeshift classroom. "I've been doing this for months, sir," she confessed softly, her accent a gentle lilt that now carried the weight of worlds. "Your son, he has a gift for it. The voices you heard, they're just us, exploring." Alexander glanced at the board, the flags a vibrant mosaic against the green slate, each one a testament to Maria's nomadic soul. Brazil's emerald fields, Spain's flamenco rhythms, France's poetic boulevards, Japan's cherry blossoms, all alive in this sunlit room. He wanted to rage, to demand explanations for this breach of protocol, but the words caught in his throat, tangled in the web of his son's delighted grin. Instead, he sank into a nearby armchair, the leather sighing under his weight, and for the first time in years, listened, not as a titan of industry, but as a father rediscovering the magic of curiosity. As the lesson resumed, Alexander became an unwilling spectator, his initial shock giving way to a grudging fascination. Maria, sensing his capitulation, wove the languages together like threads in a grand narrative, each one illuminating the others. In French, they discussed the elegance of Versailles, Elias's eyes sparkling as he described imaginary gardens in halting sentences. Le château est magnifique, avec des fontaines qui dansent. Then, pivoting to Spanish, she delved into the passion of flamenco, tapping her foot lightly to mimic the rhythm, Elias clapping along with infectious enthusiasm. "Oh, el baile es fuego en el alma," he echoed, his pronunciation raw but fervent. Alexander marveled at the transformation. His son, once a reticent figurehead at dinner tables, now gestured wildly, his small hands painting pictures in the air. The Japanese segment brought a serene hush, Maria's voice softening to a whisper as she taught basic greetings and the art of haiku, Elias furrowing his brow in concentration. "Hajimemashite, watashi wa Elias Dezu," he managed, bowing slightly with exaggerated politeness that drew a chuckle from his father despite himself. Portuguese rounded out the session, a lively recounting of carnival tales from Rio, where colors exploded like fireworks and music pulsed through the veins of the city. "A festa e alegria pura," Elias declared, his face flushed with excitement. Through it all, Maria was the conductor, her presence a beacon of unpretentious wisdom. She explained between phrases how each language carried its culture's heartbeat, the directness of English contrasting the politeness of Japanese, the romance of French entwined with Spanish's fire. Alexander, nursing his scotch, felt the barriers of his insulated life cracking, questions bubbling up like champagne. Why had he never seen this in her? How had she hidden such treasures behind feather dusters and polished silver? Hours slipped by unnoticed, the sun yielding to twilight's indigo embrace, shadows lengthening across the Persian rugs like fingers reaching for secrets. Elias, weary but exhilarated, bid farewell in a polyglot flurry, au revoir, adios, sayonara, ciao, before scampering off to bed, leaving Alexander alone with Maria in the study's fading light. The air hummed with unspoken words, the blackboard's flags now silhouettes against the gathering dusk. "How long have you been doing this, Maria?" he finally asked, his voice stripped of its usual command, laced instead with genuine awe. She hesitated, wiping chalk from her hands on her apron, then met his eyes squarely. "Since the day I started here, sir. But only with Elias for the past year. He was so lonely, you see, surrounded by everything, yet touching nothing real." Her words landed like gentle rebukes, stirring memories Alexander had buried under ledgers and luncheons. Elias's quiet pleas for stories at bedtime, dismissed in favor of bedtime routines enforced by nannies. Maria continued, her narrative unfolding like a well-worn book. She spoke of her youth in Portugal's sun-drenched Algarve, where fishermen's tales in multiple dialects sparked her love for words. A scholarship to France honed her French, a love lost in Spain infused her with its passion, a job in Japan polished her Eastern grace, and America. America was the canvas where it all converged. "Languages aren't just sounds, Mr. Vanderbilt," she said, her gaze drifting to the window where stars began to prick the velvet sky. "There lives, stories of people who laugh, cry, dream in ways we'll never know unless we listen." Alexander nodded slowly, the weight of her insight settling over him like a fine cashmere blanket. For the first time, he saw her not as staff, but as a sage in disguise, her humility a cloak over profound depths. The days that followed marked a subtle shift in the mansion's rhythm, like a clockwork mechanism recalibrated for harmony rather than haste. Alexander, haunted by the echoes of those multilingual murmurs, found himself lingering at home more often, drawn inexorably to the study's door. Maria's lessons became a ritual, each one a portal to uncharted territories. One morning, over coffee in the breakfast nook, he broached the subject tentatively. "Tell me more about Brazil," he said, surprising even himself with the request. Maria's eyes lit up, and she launched into a vivid tapestry of samba rhythms and Amazonian mysteries, her Portuguese weaving through English explanations like vines through a trellis. Elias joined them, the three forming an unlikely triad around the oak table, maps unrolled like promises of adventure. Under Maria's guidance, Alexander attempted his first phrases, "Bom dia, como vai," his tongue twisting comically around the vowels, eliciting peals of laughter from his son. It was liberating, this fumbling dance with foreign sounds, stripping away the armor of his executive persona. Evenings brought French films projected on the study wall, subtitles flickering as Maria translated nuances lost in translation, Elias curled up with popcorn, Alexander sinking deeper into the cushions. Spanish ignited debates on art and revolution, Japanese evenings unfolded with origami and Zen gardens crafted from household odds, each language peeling back layers of his worldview. Maria became the heart of it all, her patience infinite, her anecdotes rich with the sense of street food and the colors of festivals. She shared how Japanese honorifics taught respect, French subjunctives the beauty of doubt, Spanish the fire of expression. Alexander, once a spectator, now participated, his voice joining the chorus, albeit haltingly. The mansion, once a monument to solitude, pulsed with polyphonic life, voices no longer strange but symphonic. Yet not all transitions were seamless, whispers among the staff hinted at envy, and Alexander's business associates raised eyebrows at his distracted demeanor during calls. "What's gotten into you, Alex? Sound like you're on vacation," one quipped over a transatlantic line. He laughed it off, but inwardly, a storm brewed, the clash between his old life of calculated conquests and this new realm of linguistic liberation. One stormy afternoon, as rain lashed the windows like jealous lovers, he confronted Maria in the kitchen, where she was kneading dough for fresh bread, her hands dusted with flour like a sculpture's. This changes everything," he said, gesturing vaguely at the air thick with the aroma of yeast and cinnamon. "What if Elias wants to be a poet, not a CEO? What if I lose the edge that built all this?" Maria paused, her dark eyes reflecting the lightning flashes outside, and wiped her hands on a towel. "Sir, the edge you fear losing. It's not in boardrooms or balance sheets, it's in connection. Your son learns not just words, but empathy, the kind that turns rivals into allies, strangers into friends. She spoke then of her own losses, a brother adrift in Brazil's favelas, a mother whose French lullabies echoed in her dreams, and how languages had been her lifeline, pulling her through grief's tempests. Alexander listened, the reins tattoo a somber underscore to her tale, and felt the first cracks in his fortress of ambition. That night, as thunder rolled, he joined a Japanese lesson, struggling with kanji strokes that mirrored life's intricate paths. Elias cheered his father's clumsy attempts, and in that shared vulnerability, bonds forged stronger than steel. Maria watched, a quiet smile playing on her lips, knowing she had planted seeds that would outgrow any empire. Months unfurled like the pages of a well-loved atlas, and the Vanderbilt home transformed into a Babel of beauty, where English mingled freely with its global kin. Alexander's immersion deepened. He subscribed to foreign journals, tuned radios to Parisian jazz and Tokyo talk shows, even hired a chef for Spanish tapas nights that spilled laughter into the wee hours. Elias flourished, his report cards a footnote to the real growth, the confidence blooming in his step, the stories he spun at school of imaginary travels. Friends noticed the change, teasing Alexander about his midlife multilingual crisis, but he wore it like a badge, introducing Maria at dinner parties not as the maid, but as our family's linguistic maestro. She demurred, ever the picture of modesty, but her influence rippled outward, inspiring the gardeners to share Italian phrases, the cook to teach Brazilian recipes. One balmy summer evening, as fireflies danced in the gardens like living lanterns, the trio hosted an impromptu world feast, croissants beside empanadas, sushi rolls next to feijoada, each dish a gateway to its tongue's lore. Alexander raised a glass of sake, his toast a heartfelt mishmash, a la santé, salud, kanpai, sod, to bridges built from words, and the woman who showed us how. Maria blushed, Elias whooped, and in that moment, the strange voices that once haunted the halls had become the heartbeat of their home. Alexander reflected on the man he was before, isolated atop his pedestal of prosperity, and marveled at the richness now woven into his days. Maria, too, found renewal, her hidden gifts no longer buried but celebrated, a quiet vindication of her resilient spirit. As autumn returned, mirroring the season of their discovery a year prior, Alexander stood once more at the study's threshold, but this time with open arms. The blackboard, now a permanent fixture, brimmed with new flags and scribbled phrases, Elias and Maria deep in a Portuguese poem about oceans and dreams. The voices, those once mysterious murmurs, now wrapped around him like old friends, inviting him in. He had learned, through fits and starts, that true wealth lay not in vaults but in versatility, not in dominance but in dialogue. Elias, on the cusp of boyhood's adventures, carried 5 languages like passports to infinity, his world expanded beyond the mansion's gilded cage. Maria remained the steady flame, her lessons evolving to include Alexander's halting contributions, a family trinity bound by curiosity's thread. And so, in the Vanderbilt legacy, a new chapter dawned, not of fortunes amassed, but of horizons embraced, where strange voices were no longer omens, but invitations to the grand, unending conversation of humanity. The end of one story marked the beginning of countless others, each word a step into the unknown, each language a love letter to the world's boundless wonder.